Welcome to Trending in Education. Mike Palmer here. Very pleased to be joined by Zachary Davis, the founder and president of Lyceum, an educational audio platform that is launching right about now. We're very excited to have Zachary on the show. Zachary's also the organizer of the Sound Education Educational Audio Conference, which we were very happy to attend back in the fall. He's also the host of Ministry of Ideas, which is a wonderful podcast that's been around for several years. And as if that were not enough, he's also about to launch. In fact, I just listened to the first episode. So he is live with a new podcast called Writ Large about the books that had the most profound influence on the world and civilization. Lots of amazing stuff going on in Zachary's life. He's also a recent parent, as I am as well, although 15 months, I don't know how long I can say that. Regardless of all this, Zachary, I'm really happy to have you. Thank you for joining us on Trending in Education.
Thank you so much, Mike. It's a pleasure to talk with you.
So, Trending in Education, we're getting titular here. Trending in Education, we want to understand what trends are happening in the world of education. One trend that is evident in education, it's also evident more broadly in media consumption, is audio. Our listeners are listening right now, so they understand the power of audio. But I'd like to begin there with you. Top level, do you have any thoughts on education and audio and how those two are intertwined?
Sure. So about 7 years ago, I heard about a new initiative called edX, and I was invited to apply at HarvardX, which was the group that was going to be making Harvard's free, massive, open online courses. So I was one of the very first employees of HarvardX, and it was a really exciting time. It was like a blank canvas in which we could rethink, how can we educate the world with some of the world's best scholars? And so we really focused a lot on two things, really good video production and really engaging uses of technology in the form of assessments or activities or discussion. And so over the course of 7 years working at HarvardX, I worked on a lot of amazing projects, amazing courses. One of the first ones was about early Christianity, and it was a course about the letters of Paul. And we filmed the professor teaching, and we added these great animations to make it really engaging. We even created this cool, what we called a time map, which showed you both where the letter was written in the Middle East and when. And so you could kind of see the path of these letters, and it was really exciting. And when we launched, the professor that I worked with was used to seminars of 10 people, and we had 30,000 people sign up to take this course. And that was the kind of scale, right, that got everyone extremely excited about MOOCs and about online courses. And wow, maybe we can dramatically lower the cost of education through these new technologies. But pretty quickly, we encountered some struggles, which was very few people actually completed these courses. Very few people got through them. Yep. They would click on the first activity the first day, and then they would never come back. And so some of these completion rates are abysmal, like 1% to 3%. Now, I consoled myself at the time by saying, well, lots of people browse books at a library, they open the first page, not everyone takes it home. But when you would look at how many people were actually completing these courses and presumably getting, the most out of them, it was lower than the enthusiasm behind these courses. So about 3 or 4 years ago, though, I, like many Americans, started listening to podcasts on my way to work. Right. And it quickly became part of my day. And I quickly realized how powerful audio can be, both in terms of communicating ideas and knowledge, but also because it fits people's lifestyles a lot better. And one of the reasons I think people don't finish any of these MOOCs is because they're on screens all day for work. And when they come home, they don't want more screens. And they're kind of too busy to sit down with no distractions, on a desktop or something and like proceed. So I became convinced that audio was the best way to share knowledge. And so I had been wanting to work on my own education project. And so I started this show called Ministry of Ideas.
Mhm.
And Ministry of Ideas was designed to take the great conversations that I was having while a student at Harvard Divinity School and share that with more people. And so each episode is on a different topic, a different concept, like, the theology of history or cannibalism or World's Fairs. And we give you history and philosophy and cultural criticism. It was really successful. And, my podcast started getting more listeners than a lot of the Harvard faculty courses that I was, working on.
Yep.
And I think it had more to do with the medium than the message.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really captivated by education and audio. And in 2018, I started a conference called Sound Education.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't know what kind of response we would get. I didn't even know, that many educational podcasters, but we managed to get Dan Carlin to be our keynote that first year.
Mm-hmm.
And then I learned about, hundreds and hundreds of amazing independent educational podcasters who came together in Boston for a few days, and it was magic.
Mm-hmm.
And when we were all in a room and all learning about each other's work and our excitement and our audience engagement and all these things, I really started to realize that we were comprising a brand new universal university, that
Mm-hmm.
we were a kind of invisible network of educators united by this new medium.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was hooked and have been ever since. And what I'm doing now with Lyceum is attempting to give that new university a home,
Mm-hmm.
to give all of these educational podcasters a place to go deeper with their listeners and find ways of support, both financial and community, and also to help everyone else, all lifelong learners, discover the richness of these shows, because there are 1 million podcasts on Apple.
Right.
It's impossible to find the show that you're looking for unless you already know what you're looking for. So what Lyceum does is it just curates the best educational podcasts out there and helps people trying to learn something find good shows worth listening to.
Yeah, it's fantastic history there, and good job by you taking the initiative to kind of pivot off of the traditional concept of a MOOC. And in many ways, I do think educational audio is in many ways meeting some of the promise of MOOCs that never was fully realized. And many of the themes we talk about on Trending in Education regularly, you've hit on. One is, audio is the new video, is something that I like to say. And then also the importance of finding good curation of content in a world where we're swimming in noise and just confusion. It does sound as though Lyceum, which is live now too, right? So like it's launched like within the last few weeks. Is that correct?
We launched yesterday.
Oh, wow. Very timely. That's, I like to say zeitgeisty at least once a show. So this is very much in the collective consciousness, and really fantastic stuff from what I've seen so far. I want to explore more, particularly the community features I found really interesting, because as someone who both produces podcasts, hosts them, and also is an avid listener to them, one thing that I've struggled with is feeling that sense of community and connection that you can find in a great educational community or university. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because it does seem as though that has been both built into the launch of the application for Lyceum, but also just generally speaking, it does seem like that is part of your mission, as I understand it, is to not just curate, but also build that sense of a learning community through the folks who are listening to Lyceum shows.
That's exactly right. One of our taglines is we help turn podcasts into classrooms. Mm-hmm. And the way we do that is we give every single podcast a discussion room, its own discussion room, where the host or the creator can share comments and ideas and links and readings and all the things that can deepen their listener engagement with their show. Mm-hmm. Most of the shows that we produce come from research and, reading. And there's a lot that we would love to share beyond just the episode. And so we give creators that ability to do that. And it also gives listeners a place to come together and find other fans. There are really passionate trending and education listeners who would love to talk to one another and geek out about, the future of education. But right now there's really not a place to do that. You can kind of do it on Twitter and Facebook, but I would say not very successfully because it's so open and because a lot of people don't even like those platforms.
Right.
Lyceum is a safe place just for the show that the creator can control and moderate, and that listeners can, in a more private sphere, share ideas and knowledge. So that's something that's really important to us. And I think that learning should happen in community. And I think you're absolutely right that because audio is inexpensive and easy to distribute globally, I do think educational podcasting is fulfilling the promise of MOOCs that got so much attention in the national press.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I was a regular commuter, and I'd love to get your thoughts on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on listenership and folks' ability to be lifelong learners who are leaning into the opportunity that this very difficult time is affording all of us to be more reflective and look at our own personal growth. But when I was pre-COVID-19, when I was commuting to work, that was one of the main times I'd be listening to podcasts. And I was always joking that, while on the subway, my visual field was really focused on self-preservation, but I still could afford my ears and my ability to listen to learning. And then what I've been more interested in of late, now that I'm commuting less, is the idea of listening to something and then being able to supplement it with more, so that audio is great in that when you're on the go you can listen. But what I really am intrigued by, and it seems like Lyceum is beginning to explore this, is what about the more full experience when you are maybe at your home, where you have the affordance of being able to read along while listening to content, or to be able to engage in a discussion either while listening or afterwards. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like both use cases, I guess. On the one hand, the ability to engage with audio really throughout your life, whether you're doing chores around the house or you're driving somewhere, you're commuting, audio can be a really wonderful companion in those contexts. And then I'm really curious about your thoughts, because Lyceum seems to be entering into this space, when you have more of your attentional energy to be able to devote to what you're listening to. Even in the example of Writ Large, I would imagine listeners could have the books themselves in their hands, and they could be browsing through an annotated version of the book, or they could, the possibilities are really endless when you think about it. And that's always struck me. I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I think, first of all, audio works because it's hands-free, because you can do it while you're doing things in, what Mike Duncan, a host of a History of Rome podcast, calls garbage time. It used to be, oh shit, crap, I've got to do the dishes. Well, now it's like, yay, I get to do the dishes, podcast time. So I'm reluctant. I mean, there's a reason why video, isn't as good as audio for this kind of lifelong learning, the way it fits into your life in this way. So my vision would be, you listen to a show about Plato's Republic, and then after you've gotten engaged and invited into this topic, the host can say, here's a link to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy entry. This will give you a lot of good roundup. Or here's a link to a video that's really, really fantastic as well. Or here's, a text, the Project Gutenberg text, where you can start reading for yourself. So I think of great podcasts as an invitation to a topic, a spark of a topic. And then we can help listeners go a little deeper.
It makes a lot of sense. So what about these difficult circumstances that in many ways you're launching into? where, where many of us are sheltering at home. It is global, this pandemic that we're all struggling with. So I think there is almost a collective, maybe asking you to wear your student of divinity hat as well. Like there is a collective need or opportunity maybe to be more reflective and, maybe remove some of the distractions that we've all become so accustomed to in the pre-COVID-19 experience. Any thoughts on how this may impact opportunities for lifelong learning, opportunities to engage in content like educational podcasting? I've certainly been thinking of it as an opportunity for myself to kind of reimagine my own self-improvement because I have more time. It's also obviously been a time to be more reflective about the people I care about and trying to stay connected, even though I have to be physically distanced. It is a time, I think, where we're all really, it's a forcing function in many ways. So I'd love to get your perspective on that, and then where you think curated educational podcasting and the community features that you're launching may actually provide opportunities for folks while they're struggling with these difficult times.
Well, first off, all of us who are staying home right now are, struggling with loneliness and isolation. And so I think to be able to listen to a show that you like and then, share ideas and conversation with other people listening is something that we hope we can help with. I also think there's a lot of people struggling with anxiety and worry about the economy, about our culture, about our political leadership, and they're looking for solace. And, there's lots of ways to find solace, but I find that learning about history, learning about different parts of the world and the way it works can help you feel more empowered and can help you feel like you have some control over what can feel like an overwhelming sense of, despair and struggle.
Right.
So I think education is not only for practical skills, but also to give us the capacity to meet challenges like the one we're currently in. And it is for personal growth. And so I think podcasts provide an enormous wealth of resources, educational resources that can help you understand why our politics looks the way it is, can help you understand, the virus itself. And there's all sorts of scientific shows that can help you understand. So, I mean, really in times of crisis, education is an important tool we have to overcome it.
No, it's a great answer. And maybe that helps us pivot towards Writ Large, which I did want to spend a little bit of time on because I was able to listen to the first episode with the Joyce Chaplin from Harvard University, talking with you about Jules Verne's work around the world in 80 days. And it was really a fascinating conversation. And it did sort of strike the chord that I think you're talking about right here, in that it did sort of connect to this sense of timelessness and really a breadth of perspective that for me was a really lovely antidote to the 24/7 breaking news cycle, which I think is unhealthy, but it's pretty easy to get sucked into it because it is so critical to understand what's happening in the world today. So it does seem like spending focused time to get the news is certainly valuable, but then starting to carve out more time for maybe better use of my intellectual energy. And Writ Large seemed like that to me. So first off, I really enjoyed your first episode, so I'm looking forward to more. But can you describe what Writ Large is? And I'd love to hear some teases for some of the other shows, because it sounds like it's a pretty ambitious project too, in terms of the scope that you're looking to tackle here. So can you give us a little perspective on what Writ Large is? And it's launching really to coincide with the launch of Lyceum as well, right? So this is sort of it's like an anchor show for the app. And I really did enjoy the first episode. So can you talk to our listeners a bit about what Writ Large is, and maybe try to entice us with some tantalizing ideas of what's on the horizon?
Definitely. So yes, Writ Large is the first original production of Lyceum Studios, which is our original content production house.
Mhm.
And we are hoping to work with professors around the world to make brand new shows with them and new audio courses. And when we first were thinking about what should our first show be, we knew we wanted it to be something that could draw upon the resources of the Boston, Cambridge academic community.
Mhm.
And one of our first thoughts was, well, why don't we do a great book show? We'll go through the Harvard classics and we'll explain them for people. And, I think that was going to be a fine show. But, as I thought about it, I'm like, if you haven't read a book, listening to a long summary and analysis of it is kind of boring. It's, you just can't follow along. So I was playing at a park with my kids, wrestling with what concept could we do that would be exciting, even if you haven't read the book. And that's when I got the idea, well, why don't we do what happens after the ink is dry, after the book is published? It's afterlife in the world. And so this is a show about the impact of books. So you don't have to know about the book, what's in the book, really. It's all about its influence. And so there are some books that have absolutely changed our world. I mean, just think about, Darwin's Origin of Species, absolutely like changes massively the way we live and the way we think. And there are many books like that. And so that's what Writ Large focuses on. But it's not just the big famous books. It's also books you've never heard of, but nevertheless have really shaped many important things about life. So, for example, we interviewed a Stanford professor named Rowan Doran about a book called The Life and Passion of Saint William of Norwich. Okay? None of you have heard of this book. Nobody has. But this book is the most important anti-Semitic book in history. This is the book that influenced the Nazi ideology, that influences conspiracy theories even today. This was the book that first began the myth of blood libel, which is that Jewish groups were conspiring to murder Christian children and drink and eat their blood. And this book was lost for many, many years and only rediscovered recently. But the story that it started continues to resonate today. So these are the kinds of stories we're interested in talking about. We also have an interview with a professor named Peter Bohl, and he talks about a Confucian text called Great Learning. And this is the text that made education a key pillar of Chinese culture. And everyone knows Chinese are obsessed with education, obsessed with testing. And this is the book that really consolidated and amplified that idea. So, do you need to know about the Great Learning? Well, if you're interested in Chinese culture and their impact on the world, it helps. So that's what Writ Large is. And we think it's a good example of the kind of content we want to make, which is it's educational, but it's also entertaining and it's also, engaging. And I think at its best, educational podcasting does that. It takes rich, deep topics and it adds some excitement and some sound design and some passion. And it helps people really fall in love with important educational topics.
Yeah, and I love the tie back to what you were describing before, where in some ways Writ Large will introduce an audience to texts that they can then explore in more depth. So maybe, many of us read Around the World in 80 Days growing up. So like there is a nice nostalgic element to that, where I think I may have read the classic comics. So that's not technically reading, but it's close enough, but as an adult, I hadn't really thought about that book in many, many years. And then to understand that its ties to imperialism and to sort of the way in which we think about innovation and a global perspective on the world, which really hadn't existed before Jules Verne sort of imagined that and put it into this format. It actually did inspire me to go back and at least dig into the synopsis of the book and maybe get in there and read it some more. So like it is an interesting way to think about the power of audio and the breadth of reach that you get with podcasting, in that you're going to be introducing many of us to texts that had a profound influence on the world, and then leaving it up to us to either enjoy the conversation or perhaps explore with more depth through some of the tools you were describing, which is super interesting. We're coming up on time, so I want to think about other ideas outside of what we talked about. One of the questions that I like to ask all of my guests is, what trends are capturing your attention these days, whether they are specific to education and learning or whether they are more broad? You know, we talked about the trend towards audio and listening to content, but you know, we're entering the 2020s. It's clearly, you know, a transformative time in many ways in light of the global pandemic that we're facing. What's capturing your imagination in the broader global world that we're entering that will either have an impact on education or just on how we live our lives, or really anything? So this is your opportunity to freestyle. You can bring any concept to, you know, we're talking about curation. What's capturing your imagination that you think our listeners might be intrigued by?
Well, I guess I will just confirm that I do think we are entering a new audio age. And as a trend spotter yourself, I think that for 500 years, we were in a Gutenberg age, a print age. But with podcasting, with the way we can easily distribute audio, I think more and more scholarly discourse, more and more teaching will happen through audio, because we prefer the human voice to the dead page.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that affective, emotional power is going to be a great strength. So I think you'll find more and more teachers and professors using audio to share their knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
I think more and more institutions will take podcasting seriously. And I think more and more lifelong learners will be using audio rather than video or textbooks to continue to be nourished intellectually. I also think because of that, the trend of online course towards very short, 3 to 7 minute videos, I think that might be nearing an end. Now, I mean, it's not that video and YouTube is going away,
Sure.
not by any means, but I actually think that the lecture form is a beautiful form. And I think that long, rich, deep conversations is as engaging as it gets. And so I think long form is a return to a trend. And I think that people, after this pandemic, I hope that it helped us rethink the crazy pace of the world. Globalized economies move very, very quickly. And I would hope that we can keep this slower pace that has been forced upon us, but perhaps we will be able to learn something important from it.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic answer. And for our listeners who want to learn more about Lyceum, Writ Large, many of the topics that we discussed throughout today's show, where should they go? What should they do?
So you can download Lyceum on the App Store or Google Play. That's Lyceum. It's the name of Aristotle's school. And you can download the app and start listening today. And we would love for you to check it out, and we'd love for you to rate and review it and let us know if there's features that you would want. And then you can listen to Writ Large in Lyceum or any podcast app. You can also learn more about the show at writlarge.fm.
Awesome. Zachary Davis, thanks so much for joining us. You're a wonderful guest, and appreciate the thought leadership that you've provided me in our limited exposure thus far. And I look forward to continuing the conversation down the road.
Thank you so much, Michael.
And to our listeners, we'll be back again soon. Thanks again for listening.